Alright, so today we're going to talk about sex. So the first thing I want to talk about is why people have sex. So why do people have sex? This should be a very easy question to answer. They have sex to reproduce, right? Great. Why else? Is there any other reason that people have sex? To share something. To share an intimate moment. And what happens when people share things? What happens to their relationships?
They became more close.
Yeah, so people have sex to bond together. So even if a couple can't have children, so there are some people who are unable to have children for whatever reason, but they still have sex too, and one of the reasons that they do this is to bond with one another. So people have sex to make babies, they have sex to bond. Why else?
For pleasure.
Because it feels good. Sex feels awesome. So people have sex because it feels good. Anything else?
For money.
Oh, we have an external viewer. Yeah, come on in.
Except for money.
For money, yeah. So if you don't have much money and you're hungry and you can't get any food or anything, by having sex with someone you might be able to get some food, right? Or money. So people have sex for lots and lots of different reasons. They have sex for fun, because it feels good. They have sex to bond with one another. They use it in exchange for protection, for money, for food, also status. How do people have sex for status?
They both.
They sleep with their boss. Yeah, that's right. So, do you want a raise? Do you want a better position in this company? Or maybe there's this stereotype about actresses in Hollywood, right? Oh, I want to be in the movie. Well, I'm the director in the movie. If you have sex with me, you can be in my movie. Oh, yes. So people have sex for a lot of reasons, and people have sex to make babies. But why do people have sex to make babies? There are lots of species that don't have sex at all. Like yeast. Actually, that's not completely true. But yeast typically doesn't produce sexually. How do they produce? Asexually. How do they make yeast babies? And you buy a packet of Maya, you put it in your flour, you add some water, and it reproduces, right? This is what makes bread so good. How do they reproduce?
They have different types of fertility. And they have different types of to be much more.
How? So how do they reproduce to become much more? You take one yeast cell, you give it some flour, you give it some water in the right temperature, and that one yeast cell will become 2, which will become 4, which will become 8, and so on and so forth. How does this happen? It's not like it's having sex with anyone when it's 1. It's all by itself. You guys heard of cloning? What's cloning? Yes?
I don't Turkish, but how can I?
Okay, say it in Turkish, someone can translate.
In the artificial, for example, laboratories, laboratorians put these cells or DNAs, and they come together with this.
Actually, with cloning, it's not that you're putting different DNA together. It's you're taking DNA from one thing, and then you're making a new organism based entirely on that one bit of DNA. Actually, on all of the chromosomes that are there. So yeast, when it reproduces, it basically clones itself. It makes another identical twin, basically, right? So humans, we don't do this. When I want to have a baby, I don't say, oh, I'd like to have a baby now. Okay, let's start cloning myself. Pop! And there's little William Jr., right? We don't do that. Instead, we have sex. Why? What does sex add? What do we get out of having sex in terms of not money and prestige and fun? combine genes. So my wife and I, we had sex. We have kids, so duh, right? So we combined our genes. They got some of my genes and some of my wife's genes, which means that their genes are
Mix of tumors.
a mix. They're a different mix from anyone else in the world, unless we happen to have twins, which we didn't. So by combining the genes and through the processes that end up making the egg and the sperm cells, not only do the genes get recombined, but you get different parts of different genes, and this increases genetic variations. What do we know about genetic variations in evolution? Variations produce different characteristics. That's exactly right. And some characteristics are better at surviving and reproducing, right? So if I can increase the variations, then there's more variability for evolution to work with. This is a good thing. So it allows natural selection to more quickly select adaptive traits. Interestingly, yeast, which normally produces asexually, if you put it in high stress situations, so turn up the temperature that makes it sort of harder to live, or do some other things, maybe put some caustic chemicals in it, they'll actually start sexually reproducing to increase the variability of their offspring, to potentially produce some offspring that are going to be able to better survive in that different, harsher environment. So sex is really a great thing when it comes to long-term survival of a species. Interestingly, women, this is another one of these disgusting studies, women prefer the sense of men that have much different genes than they do. So how do you measure this? Well, you can look and see what genes a woman has, then you get a bunch of men, you can see what genes the men have, and then you put t-shirts on all the men. You tell them, wear these t-shirts for 3 days. Don't take showers, don't use deodorant. We want to get your natural manly odor. So they wear these t-shirts for a while, and then they give them to the women, and they say, would you please smell this? This is kind of gross, but we're going to pay them. So, some of the women need money, so they say, okay, I'm a starving college student, so I'll be happy to sniff, this sort of nasty shirt. So they sniff it, and then they rate how good it smells. And interestingly, the men with greater genetic variations compared to the woman who's making the choices, they end up smelling better, which is a good thing. If they want to reproduce and produce offspring that have greater genetic variations, by being able to smell someone with different genes from your own, you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to increase the diversity of your children. It's not just people, too. There's some great white sharks. I forget this documentary that I watched, but there are these sharks that live in a particular area, and then when they get to a certain age, they go around the world looking for sharks from different areas to reproduce with. Why? Well, you get different genes. It increases the diversity in the gene pool and increases the likelihood that that your children will be able to successfully, live. So, interesting. Okay, some more whys. Why is sex pleasurable? Why is it a primary reinforcer? Why is it at the bottom of Maslow's needs? It's a physiological need. What would be good about sex being fun? Why is this a good thing? Why is it good that we have this drive to procreate?
People would want to do it more, and then for the human race to.
Yeah! By wanting to reproduce, and by making reproductive acts fun, this increases the chances that you will reproduce. Right? Imagine that I have a group of people, and all of you have no interest in sex. None! It's not fun. In fact, maybe you find it detestable. And the rest of you guys, you find sex a lot of fun. And you have this real strong urge. Who are going to have more children? They are, right? And their children, if this drive is genetically related, then their children are probably going to want to have more sex too, right? So your genes all die out, sorry for you guys, and your genes keep going on. Woohoo! This helps people procreate, especially when there was a birth control. Like modern science has sort of thrown a wrench into the evolutionary mix because now people, they still have sex to have fun, but the act of having sex isn't as likely to lead to procreation when people are using birth control. All right, so some side effects of primary reinforcement. By having sex be a primary reinforcer, this means that people will trade things for it. You can use sex to get ahead in your career. You can use sex, not that you should. I'm not talking about morals here, just talking about possibilities. So you can use sex to get money. You can use sex to get protection. Also, classical conditioning. How does classical conditioning fit in with sex? We can talk about morals for a little bit. A lot of major religions, and even a lot of non-religious people, say something about when individuals should have sex. When should people have sex? Yeah, you wait until you're married, and then when you get married, have sex. Why? Why might this be a good thing?
Probably because when you get bonded with the person, then you might break up, and that will affect you. Because it says sex brings about bonds.
Yeah, so sex, there's a bonding
So when you
component, right?
When you are bonded with somebody, you are bound.
Right.
Before marriage, then
So-
it is likely that you will break up.
Right, so if you wait to have sex until you're married and then you're only having sex with the married person, then this means that you're going to be forming strong bonds with that individual, right? If you're having sex with other people, maybe before marriage isn't that big of a deal, but if you're having sex with lots of other people, this is going to make you bond with lots of other people, and comparatively you'll have a weaker bond with the person that you are committed to. Does this make sense? So this provides a potential reason, a scientifically based reason for some of the morals that people have. It's a potential reason to avoid adultery too. Because by having sex with someone besides the person that I'm committed to, that's going to weaken my bond between that person. Fetishes. How can fetishes develop with classical conditioning? What are fetishes? Does anyone know? One person knows. Do you know? No?
Kind of obsessed.
Okay, when you're obsessed about what?
Sex.
Not just sex, there's
Love.
something else. No, not love.
Could be anything.
Like what? So classical conditioning, you take a neutral stimulus and you pair it with something that will unconditionally provoke some good response, right? So sex unconditionally produces pleasure, right? So you pair something neutral with this thing that's producing pleasure. What might this neutral thing be? Fetishes. So some people have fetishes for shoes. So there's some guys who like high-heeled shoes, and they need to have like high-heeled shoes around in order to like feel good when they're having sex. Why? Well, possibly by pairing something neutral like a high-heeled shoe with an initial sexual experience that's very satisfying. Now this becomes strongly conditioned, and then you find the shoe itself arousing. So later on, when you want to have sex and get completely aroused, you might say things like, "Oh, could you please wear those shoes?" Right? So classical conditioning can lead to fetish-type behavior as well. It can also explain a wide range of sexual behavior. Sex feels good, so there are a lot of things that people will do sexually that are very different. So how wide is the range of human sexual behavior?
What do you mean?
Like, what types of things do people, and what types of things and who do people have sex with?
Virgin people.
Some people have sex with virgins, okay. men. Some people have sex with women.
Animals.
Some people have sex with animals. Some people have sex with
Objects.
themselves.
Objects.
Some people have sex with objects. Yeah, there's a ton of things. There's heterosexual sex, right? Between a male and a female. There's homosexual sex between two males or two females. There's bisexual sex. People that will be happy having sex with males or females. There are people that are asexual. Maybe they don't have sex with anything, or maybe they just have sex with themselves. There's polyamory. What's polyamory?
Having sex with many people at a time.
Yeah, polyamory, having multiple partners, right? So the last class we were talking about, what happens as your brain stops producing this large amount of dopamine as you're with someone for a long period of time. Someone says, well, you go and cheat. And someone else says, you just get a new wife, right? So that's polyamory. So the range of human sexual behavior is really, really wide. Now, I'd like to apologize because previously I've used a lot of heteronormative language. What does heteronormative mean?
Saying that it is only normal for a male and female to have sex.
That's exactly right. That's beautiful. So it's the idea that it's only normal for men and women to have sex with one another. And by using heteronormative language, I sort of ignore the wide range of human behavior. So in previous classes when I've talked about things, I might point to a male and say like, oh, and imagine if you had a girlfriend. But I don't know. He might not like girls at all. He might like guys. So by using this heteronormative language, I treat heterosexual behavior as if that's the norm and that's the standard, when in fact there really isn't a huge norm. Okay, so nature versus nurture. What's the nature versus nurture debate?
When we talk about things that we develop and things that are naturally part of us.
So things that are naturally a part of us, right? This is nature. So I have an X and a Y chromosome. So my X and Y chromosomes make me what? They make me a man. If you have two X chromosomes, what does that make you? A woman, right? So there are genetic reasons that I developed the way that I did, that he developed the way he did, and that she developed the way that she did, right? So that's nature. There are genes that are causing people to behave the way that they behave. What about the nurture? Social causes. That's exactly right. So, there's a big nature versus nurture debate when it comes to sexual behavior. So some people say that the reason that some people are homosexual is because of nature. There's something about their genes that makes them gay. There are other people who say, no. It's not their genes that make them gay. It was their parents. It was their environment that they lived in. It was how they were nurtured. So I'm going to have gay kids because I wear a pink shirt. And the social norms should dictate that, pink is a feminine color. I actually heard some women talking about wearing silk. And guys that wear silk, or mothers that put silk on their baby boys, are going to make them gay. So don't use a silk blanket if you have a baby boy. They're going to be gay. This is what type of an explanation? This is a nurture explanation. Now, this is known as a false dichotomy. What's a dichotomy? I think we talked about this earlier. Very early.
It's one thing into two.
Yeah, so a dichotomy is when there are two alternatives, right? It's either nature or it's nurture. Is there another possibility? It's a combination of both nature and nurture, right? If you frame it as, well, it's just your genes, that's a nature argument. If you frame it as, it's just how you were raised, that's a nurture argument. But it's not necessarily like that. It's possible that both are involved in producing differences in sexual behaviors. So there's an interaction. What's gender?
Social
Not the identity.
Classification.
What gender am I? I'm a male, right? You are female. So gender is related to traits that distinguish between males and females. So males, at least after puberty, we have deeper voices, we have more facial hair. I don't, but you can look at him, he's got plenty of it. We have penises. Women, on the other hand, they have vaginas, they have wider hips, they have larger breasts, they have higher voices, they don't have as much facial hair. There are lots and lots of traits that differentiate between males and females, right? So, what if we found a new sexually producing species? Something that we've never seen before. We're not sure if it's a mammal, we're not sure if it's an amphibian. All we know is that it's a new species and then it's sexually reproducing. How do we determine whether it's a male or a female?
I don't think we can determine that because it's going to look alike. I've seen someone that looks like both female and male.
So there is some androgyny. Androgyny means like that it's difficult to tell the difference between a male or a female. There's a Saturday Night Live skit where there's someone named Pat, and Pat is an androgynous name. It could be a male name or a female name. Are there names like that in Turkish?
Yes.
Where men like what?
Yüksek.
Yüksek?
Yüksek.
Yüksek. So yüksek, is it a male or is it a female? You can't tell by the name. If they dress in the right way and they don't have obvious physical traits, you might not be able to tell, right? So imagine that we found someone like that. And we didn't know if they were male or female. They're also like hermaphrodites. What are hermaphrodites? Hermaphrodites are people that share characteristics of both sexes. So how do we know if this new thing that we found is male or female? There's something that scientists use to define who the male is and who the female is. Because not all females in the animal kingdom have breasts. Snakes don't have breasts. There are lots of fish that swim around and they don't have a penis and vagina and have intercourse to produce babies. They both just release their stuff and babies get made. How do you know which one's the male and which one's the female? Egg production. It's not just egg production. It has to do with the gamete production. So the egg is the female gamete and the sperm is the male gamete. How do you know which one is the male and which one is the female? Well, biologically, the scientists all got together and they said, we're going to call the larger gamete the female. So the one that produces the larger one, we're going to say that that's the female. So this is the biological definition of sex. And this is determined by genetics. Now, gender identity, on the other hand, is different from gender. So what's gender identity?
What you associate yourself with.
Yeah, it's all about which gender you identify yourself as. Not necessarily what genes I have, not necessarily what my parts are or what my voice is, but the gender that I choose to identify as, right? So there are some men who dress up as women every day, all the time. What gender are they identifying as? They are identifying as female, even though biologically they might be male. Now this correlates with biological gender. So I can guess that you're male, and you're female, and you're female, and you're female, and you're female. I haven't looked at any of your genes. None of you have shown me your privates, and I don't want to see them. But I can see how you identify yourself, right? And oftentimes, the way that people identify themselves, in fact, most of the time that people identify themselves, it's consistent with their biology. But ultimately, you have the final say. So who's this? Last semester, I used an American, and everyone's like, I don't know who that is, but so this one worked. Who is that? Bulem Efsoy, right? And who is he or she?
Used to be.
He used to be a he, but he now identifies as a she. And in fact, this person, let's say, might get mad if you say he, right? Because this person has chosen to identify as a female. This person, on the other hand, is chosen to identify as a male. Okay, what are gender roles? Where's my
So, he said he has chosen to be identified as she. But if you look at her facially, she looks like. I'm talking about this person. The facial expression shows that she's even female.
The facial expression shows that she's female?
Yes.
Because you see females walking around like, look around, how many of the women in our class are sitting there like, oh teacher, this is Jokovic. Look, he's got the same facial expression.
What makes it to say it should be a male?
Oh, well, so, okay, you're not Turkish, neither am I, so we might not know the history. So, this individual
She knows that.
previously was a male, identified as a male. Biologically, the chromosomes, if you look at the chromosomes, male. However, this person is chosen to identify as a female. So they dress up like a female, they have concerts, they sing as a female, right? Has a boyfriend, which is heteronormative. If you identify as a female, then the heteronormative thing to do would mean that then you're going to have a boyfriend, right?
You know why I said so? Sorry.
Yeah.
I've seen a man with both female and male placenta,
Uh-huh.
and they had to operate.
Yeah,
the
so,
one that he chose the one that he really wants, and then they cut the other one off.
yeah, so interestingly, not everyone is born with XX or XY. There are some people born with XXX, and there are some people born XYY, and there are probably some, I think there's an XO, which I'm not sure what the O means. Maybe the Y just didn't get in there. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of things that can influence how the genitals develop. So testosterone is a big thing that's responsible for organizing the how do I want to say this? The unformed genitalia. So not babies. The developing fetus has like parts that could become male or female. At some point, we're both, except for the genetics, we have the same junk. And then there's a portion on the Y chromosome that tells the gonads, which will either become testes or ovaries, to start becoming testes, and they start producing more testosterone. Women have testosterone too. Your adrenal glands produce testosterone. So some women that have the XX genes, they have a deficiency where their adrenal glands produce tons and tons of testosterone. So in this situation, the testosterone tells their genitals to start developing more what's consistent with the male. It's interesting. Women are the default. If you don't have testosterone when you're an infant, you'll develop female genitalia. So it's the exposure to testosterone that's really crucial. So some people, they don't, even though they might have an XY, they don't get enough testosterone to fully develop the male genitalia. And similarly, some people with the XX will get too much testosterone and not fully develop the female genitalia, and there'll be sort of a mix. So then there's some debate about what should the parents do. In the past, the medical consensus was, well, it's easier to make a vagina than it is to make a penis. It's easier to cut stuff off, right, than it is to add things. So they would say, make these kids girls. We're gonna, cut up their genitals to make them look like a female. Now this is actually not endorsed anymore. There are a lot of people that say that this is a really bad idea because you have a lot of these people who are genetically male, who have enough testosterone that changed the way their brain is organized, and they're really confused when they grow up, some of them, because they've been told all their life that they're a female, but they like to do the male stuff. They like to play with the male toys. They like boys. They like girls, right? And then they find out that when they were young, they had the surgery, so this upsets them. So now when there are instances like this, the parents are told to, treat, I forget if they say raise it as a male or female, but the important thing is to wait until the child makes a choice and says, look, I feel more like a female, let's have the surgery and make me like that. Or I feel more like a male, why don't we have the surgery to make me more like a male? All right, so gender roles. These are things that our society tells us how we should act. These are basically social schemas, right? How should boys and men act? How should girls and women act? Some girl's having a birthday party. What type of toy do you buy her?
Barbie.
You buy her a Barbie. A boy's having a birthday party. What toy do you buy him? A car, right? These are things that society has said is appropriate for boys and girls to play with. Now, when my oldest son was younger, he loved Barbie princesses. He would stare at them. Oh, so we bought him a Barbie. This was not following the social schemas, and some people get angry about stuff like this. There was some boy in America recently who wanted to paint his fingernails, and this is something that society says that girls and women should do, not things that boys should do. So he painted his fingernails, and his mother had a blog, and his mother posted pictures on the blog and said what a fun afternoon they had together. And people went crazy. Are you crazy? What are you doing? You're going to make your son gay, which is what type of an argument? Nature or nurture? It's a nurture, yeah. Anyway, the gender roles are determined by society. You know, what are women supposed to do? Are they supposed to, you know, be in the military and going around killing people? Or are they supposed to be pleasant and help people and educate people? Right? There are some things that society says that women should do and should not do. Okay, so where's the interaction? I said that gender, right, your phenotype is determined to a large extent by your genes. Your gender identity is determined by you, and gender roles are determined by society. This doesn't sound like an interaction, right? This is nature, this is, I don't know, this is nurture. Is there an interaction? Well, let's take a look. How is gender identity determined by genes? I already sort of mentioned this. Which gender do you identify as? You don't know yet. He's still making up his mind. How about you? She identifies as a female. I would imagine if we took a genetic test, she would have XX chromosomes, right? There's a correlation. So because there's this correlation, this gender identity, which is determined by you, is in part dependent on your genes. How is it determined by society? What do a lot of people say if the girls want to play with trucks when they're growing up? Or the boys want to play with the Barbies? No, don't play with the Barbies. You're a boy. Don't play with the trucks. You're a girl, right? So society is also influencing how people are thinking about themselves. And gender roles are actually determined somewhat by genes too. So men on average are stronger. Not every man is stronger than every woman, but on average men are stronger. Which would make sense that there would be more men in roles that need a lot of strength. In the military, where you have to carry big, heavy guns, long distances. The stronger you are, the better you're going to be able to do that. Right? All right, so sexual orientation. What's this? This is different than gender identity.
Educating people about sexual...
No. So, sexual orientation, it's not like a university orientation where we're going to teach you about, you know, the university.
Sexual preference.
It's a sexual preference. Do you like males or females? Or both? Or animals? Or neither? So it's basically what gender you're sexually attracted to. And this is different from, but correlated with, gender identity. So most people that identify as males are sexually attracted to which gender? And most people that identify as females are attracted to which gender? Males. Yeah, so there's a big reason behind people's use of heteronormative language. This is related to genes. Concordance rates are higher in monozygotic twins. Concordance rates? What a concordance rate is basically if I'm something, how much is this other person that's related to me also like that? So if I'm gay and I have a twin, how likely is it that my twin is gay? And we can look at whether my twin is an identical twin or whether he's a fraternal twin. What's the difference between identical and fraternal twins?
Look alike.
They look alike, and more importantly, they have exactly the same genes. Identical twins share exactly the same genes. So, a monozygotic twins means that we both came from one zygote. That means that there was one fertilization that took place and we both came out of the same thing, which means that we have the same genes. So if there's a genetic component to homosexuality, would it be more likely that we would find both monozygotic twins being gay or both heterozygotic twins being gay? Mono, and that's exactly right. So with monozygotic twins, you see that sexual preferences are much more highly correlated than they are in dizygotic or heterozygotic twins. But there's also hormonal influences. So fraternal birth order is associated with sexual orientation. So the more boys that a woman has, the more likely it is that the boys that are born later are going to be gay. Yeah. So if you're the firstborn male, you're much more likely to be straight than a thirdborn male. This is interesting. So the idea about this is that the mother's immune system is it reacts differently to the male fetus than it does to the female fetus. And by more exposure, the immune system has a stronger and stronger reaction with every additional baby. This is a controversial issue, and the science on this is sort of divided. But there is some evidence that hormones may play a role. Environments, different cultures have different incidences and different sexual orientations. So the USA and Turkey are very strongly against homosexuality in the military, right? Is this the case in every culture that is or has been? So which cultures have really liked having homosexuals in the military? Ancient Greece! Yeah, they thought homosexuals in the military was the bomb! Dude, come on! Why would this be a reasonable sort of idea? Why might having homosexuals in the military be a good thing? And encouraging your men to act in homosexual ways, why could this be a good thing? They don't have babies and they don't have responsibilities, but you don't have to have gay sex to not have babies. You can just have sex with yourself and not have babies, right?
Which means they can stay in the army forever. This kind of sense.
No, it doesn't have to do with that because wars often last a long time and you want replacement soldiers to come up. So it's important for them to have some heterosexual sex too. If they're only having gay sex, then the things that make them strong warriors aren't going to be getting passed on as much. Why else? What else did we say? What other reason did we say that people have sex for? Besides fun, besides procreating? Yeah, it's not money that I'm looking for. Huh? Status? No. You said it earlier. Why do people have sex? I think to share something which helps people bond. Yeah, it improves group bonds. So if I'm fighting a war with someone, if we've had sex together and we have a strong bond with one another, am I going to try to protect him more or less? More. I will fight harder, right? So potentially having homosexuals in the military could be a really good thing. But this is a big cultural difference. We'll skip Kinsey's continuum for right now. The basic idea with the continuum is that there's not just straight or gay. That straight or gay is also a false dichotomy. There's a continuum. There can be really, really, really straight, or mostly straight, a little gay, or very, very gay, or mostly gay, and a little straight. So there's a fluidity of sexuality. People change their sexual orientation over their lifetime. Interestingly, this happens more with women than it does with men. Also, sexual arousal to different types of pornography. This is another interesting study. So if you guys have ever had your blood pressure taken, they develop these like little cuffs that you could fit around the male's penis, and then you could show them different types of porn. You could show them like males having sex with males, you could show them having females having sex with males, or females having sex with females, and then when guys get excited, what happens?
Blood pressure.
Huh?
Blood pressure.
Blood pressure increases in a certain part, and they get an erection, right? The penis gets thicker, which you can measure then with this little cuff. For women, they do it differently. There's not anything hanging down so you can't put a cuff on. Instead, you can make this little air tube, slip it inside, and then as women get more excited, also blood flows to that region, and that will also be similarly squeezed. Interestingly, so if you show different people different types of pornography, women show more continuity than males. They get more, women who identify as straight get more excited by watching two women have sex than males that identify as straight get excited watching men have sex. Women, they also conceal their ovulation. Ovulation is the time that women are most fertile. By concealing the ovulation, this produces some benefits. Imagine that I knew exactly when my wife was going to be fertile. If I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to raise someone else's babies, what could I do? I could make sure that I stayed by her when she was fertile, right? It's called mate guarding. I am guarding my mate. No, 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 you can't have her. But if I never know when she's fertile or not, what might I need to do? I might need to stay around and mate guard better. Be around more often, be a better provider. So concealed ovulation can provide some benefits to women, but it's not really super well concealed. When women are ovulating, their skin is clearer, they look more healthy, prettier. Not only does their skin, if you take off their makeup, not only does their skin look nicer and they look more healthy, they spend more time on their physical appearance. So women will spend more time getting dressed, putting on makeup, doing other things related to their physical appearance when they are most fertile. Women are better at detecting the sexual differences or the genetic differences in men, like with those shirt studies, when they are most fertile. And they're also more likely to cheat. And they're more likely to cheat with really masculine guys. When they pick long-term mates, they prefer less masculine guys. People that are going to be good providers, but that aren't going to go around and cheat on them a lot. Because higher levels of testosterone are linked with higher levels of infidelity. So they marry someone who is not as masculine, but who's going to be a really good provider, comparatively. But then when they cheat, typically they have sex with someone with a lot of testosterone, which can increase the likelihood that their children will have more testosterone, well, the male children will have more testosterone and be able to reproduce more. All right, next class we're going to talk about faith.